and welcome to the Alpine Valley School podcast. I'm your host, Marc Gallivan. Today, I'm going to talk with a parenting expert about what it's like to parent self-directed kids. This is episode 58 of our program. You can find show notes for this episode at alpinevalleySchool.com/podcast/EP58. Before we jump in, let me tell you a little more about our school. Alpine Valley School is a private K-12 school located in Denver, Colorado, that follows a self-directed democratic education model, also known as the Sudbury model. On this podcast, we discuss our model of education, share stories from day-to-day life at school, and interview families involved in our program on their experiences. I also want to remind listeners about our upcoming open house, which we are hosting on July 9th, 2022, beginning at 10 a.m. Our annual summer open house is a great time to come and visit the school if you've been interested in seeing the campus and learning more about our model, or for family members of current students who want to see the school for themselves. You can find out more information on our website, alpinevalleySchool.com/open house. When I became a parent 8 years ago, I thought I knew what I was getting into. After all, I'd been around kids my entire life and had siblings who were much younger than me. How much different could it be? Pretty drastically different, it turns out. And while I had been involved with Alpine Valley School for over 18 years at that point, I felt totally unprepared to translate my values as a former student into my actions as a parent. How could I preserve the school's message of freedom, respect, and responsibility at home and support my son in pursuing his life while also managing my family's expectations for him and juggling my own insecurities about whether or not he would be adequately prepared for adulthood? Exhausting. If you've listened to this show before, you know that the Sudbury model of education asks a lot of us as parents. And it's with that in mind that I sat down with parenting coach Angela Young. Angela has 4 kids of her own, all enrolled in self-directed education, and is also a staff member at the Open School, a fellow Sudbury school located in California. I have to tell you, just a few minutes talking with Angela really put my mind at ease, and she immediately gave me some advice that I could really use. This is one of my favorite interviews I've ever done on this show, and I really hope you enjoy it too. Here's Angela.
Hi, everyone who's listening. My name is Angela Young, and I am a conscious parenting guide, but also a parent of 4 self-directed students and a staff member at the Open School, a democratic school in Orange County. So my background is in specifically conscious parenting, which is by definition using our relationship with our child for the parent's healing. And then by default, when we do that, when we work on our limiting beliefs, our perspectives about parenting, our conditioning, we naturally fall into alignment and become the parent that we really want to be, have the impact that we really want to have, and also create a relationship with our child that is a joyful feeling of connection and the most beneficial for the both of us. So it's a really lovely way to very tangibly see how our self-work is like everything to do with parenting. Not only tying in like our own healing to the picture, but how do we completely like paradigm shift this education and bring it into our own homes? You know, it can be challenging if we have students in a school who are operating in one way and then come home and the home environment is not exactly aligned with the way that the school operates, just because we're trying to create some consistency. And a lot of times we don't have that consistency in the home or the matching up in the home simply because we're just not aware of how that might look based on our conditioning. Yeah. Conscious parenting has a lot to do with, there's tag words nowadays like positive parenting, gentle parenting, and conscious parenting goes right along with that. And these are basically allowing children the space to be themselves, feel their emotions, have their own perspectives, and have parents allow space for that. So that really matches so well with the model of self-direction. It's not like about putting our control, punishment or our biases necessarily onto a child within the home. It's about honoring who that child is already and watching them develop. So my personal experience, actually, what I struggled with in the beginning was at first being very ideological and wanting to give my children the most freedom that I possibly could, and not really knowing where the fine lines were with balance with that. And a lot of times when I wanted to honor who my child was, what ended up happening is I actually became a doormat to my child. That seems to be like a phase that a lot of parents go through as we're working on, well, what do we really stand for? How do we want to be as a parent when we have different conditioning growing up? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that phase. I just think that it's part of the process. And what I learned is that there is this art form, there's this delicate balance of also honoring who you are and honoring and finding out where your boundaries are within relationship. And so conscious parenting or self-directed education or self-directed parenting does not mean that there's no boundaries. In fact, the boundaries are where a lot of the curriculum, a lot of the learning actually come from. It's just that those boundaries are created for different reasons, perhaps, than the boundaries that we had as a child or that we had in schooling. So typically the boundaries are created to support the freedom and autonomy of everyone involved. How do I help you live the life that you really want to live? But also, how do I help myself live the life that I want to live? And where is that balance? Where do we meet? That was a really clarifying moment for me to be like, okay, as children are expressing their freedom and going through the ability to create the life that they want, which is a huge task, by the way, they naturally rub up against the freedom of others. And this is sort of the beauty and the really tactile learning of the self-directed environment. Being emotionally aware helps because sometimes when we feel upset, our reaction usually is to project that upset feeling onto whoever's around us. And children tend to be a really easy scapegoat for this just because they're less able to advocate for themselves. So it's like a really easy way to like dump our upset feelings. There's also another side to that though. You might have a personality that when you feel upset, you internalize like a lot of those upset feelings inside. Either way, becoming aware of like what we're actually feeling inside, and when we notice that we have a swing in the negative direction, like we feel triggered, we feel upset, uncomfortable, whatever it is, to just pause and just to get curious as to what's going on inside you. I believe one of the most common struggles that parents initially find, especially if you've come from a different environment prior, and children, this is one of their first experiences with quote unquote total freedom, although it's, of course, there's many rules and boundaries within that, is electronic use. That's one of the first things that come up. Because from what I've seen is that typically if you have not had the freedom to use electronics in that way, then you will really want to take advantage of that freedom. And that might look for a while like the child just plays video games or just stays on the iPad. And that's typically what parents struggle with right away. And there's this whole learning experience there to become aware of. First off, if we have like lingering technophobia, this seems to be a very common thing where technology is sort of demonized. And we can look at our beliefs there and see there is actually a huge amount of benefit that comes from using technology. And parents who are interested in self-directed education are probably aware of this. The second thing that comes to mind is it's not just about our technophobia. It's also about realizing that children go through phases. And so they might just be expressing like, wow, I have this freedom. And that's a necessary phase to go through because once you have been able to express it, then naturally the interest in that might wear off. Like it gets a little boring. Maybe you complete the game and you're like, what do I do now? Or you want to make a friend. But that, man, with being self-directed, there's so much restraint that happens because there's an element of trust. Like I'm trusting that what my child is inspired towards, what they're interested in, what they're called to now is serving them on some level. The key to being comfortable with a child being self-directed is to go through our own experience of being self-directed ourselves. So it's really hard for someone to trust another human being's development when we were not allowed to go through our natural development, typically with like open freedom with play and stuff like that. So we're sort of listening to our intuition or what speaks to us, and we're saying, this feels right to me, but I might not have actually seen it in my own life. So what's really helpful for parents right off the bat is to perhaps allow yourself a little freedom to follow what really inspires you. Like, get in touch with that inner child again. Paint, draw, do something creative. I don't know, allow yourself to rest, take a nap, and look at all the judgmental thoughts that come up from that. Because as we've been conditioned that if we actually listen to what speaks to us, we're going to be punished, or something gnarly is going to happen. Like you're going to be judged or excluded from the tribe, stuff like that. So these are these root fears that are in us. When we start to see that, hey, I've allowed myself a little freedom, and I've seen how my interests totally benefit my life in ways that maybe I didn't think. Like, it's not just about this experimental painting that I was doing that now is a pretty picture on the wall. I've learned more about myself. I've learned more. I've had thoughts of realization that come while I'm doing that, insights, and it's all the subtleties that are underneath. So basically, to sum up that conglomerate of thought is, allow yourself the freedom to just be, so that you can allow your child the freedom to just be. To sum up the thought process here, it's to be with the process that you are in, and to not worry that that process is wrong is really helpful. A lot of times when I hop on the phone with parents, they actually have a background of understanding the basics of what it means to be a gentle parent or a conscious parent, or even self-directed education. And the real struggle is our humanity, the fact that we're not perfect, and that we have these ideals in our head that we're trying to match up to, but then in the day-to-day, we don't always match up to those ideals. So I guess what I would like to say is that we cannot expect perfection from ourselves. And in fact, if we were perfect, we probably wouldn't be as helpful to our child. Our child actually needs us the way we are now. Our ability to demonstrate how to recover from making mistakes, and demonstrate a living, breathing example of what a human being is, that has a wide range of emotion, and how we handle those emotions, how we sit with those emotions, how we process those emotions, is giving them a really valuable gift. So the intention is not to be the perfect, most ideological parent that you can. The intention is to just be present with who you are and what's coming up for you. That doesn't mean that we give license to just like project everything that's coming up for us. That's not what I mean. It means just be aware of what's coming up, so that we can show them through example how to be human. One of the biggest things I've learned about having self-directed children is that I am not as important as I think I am. And I don't mean that I'm not worthy, or that I shouldn't show up as I am, or I shouldn't listen to my instincts. I mean that in an ego sense, a lot of times I think that if I'm not meddling, if I'm not micromanaging, if I'm not solving all the problems, that things are not going to turn out the way that they should. And so I've learned, and I am learning still, the ability to have restraint and to observe what's happening. That typically arises when my child is having a dispute with one of their siblings, having a challenge at school. It's typically with the tough situations where you're like, oh, I want to help here, and realizing that, wait a minute, there seems to be like a natural process that children have for the most part, regulating themselves or problem solving. There are obvious times when it's time to step in, like when violence is being used or something, but there's this sort of magic in just being able to process problems on their own. And I realize, wow, I am not that important in that way. Like, they have it covered.
Thank you so much to Angela for taking the time to offer that meaningful advice and to share her own struggles. It helps me so much to know that other people, even parenting experts, are grappling with some of the same stuff that I am. If you'd like to read more about Angela and the Open Schools program, you can check out the show notes for this episode, which are available at alpinevalleySchool.com/podcast/EP58 for episode 58. If you have an idea for an episode, a question, or a comment, drop us a line at podcast@alpinevalleySchool.com or reach out to us on social media. And please do visit for our upcoming summer open house if you happen to be in the area. More information about that is available on our website. I'm Marc Gallivan. This is the Alpine Valley School podcast, and we'll be back again soon with more stories of real learning for real life.